Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest installment of OnlyJosh. It's been a while since we've had an OnlyJosh episode, but we're bringing it back. For those unfamiliar with the show, this is the show that we do to kind of break the norm of their typical media talk and nerd talk, and we try to talk about real subjects. But I have some awesome people here with me tonight, and as you can tell, we're going to be discussing men's mental health. So for those of you that don't know, June gets a lot of conversation about it being another theme for the month, and I think there's something that's probably a little more dire to speak of, especially in this day and age, and that is men's mental health. So I've got some incredible people here with me. Right below me, I have one of my good friends that I grew up with, Sarah, and I'm going to let each of these people do their own introductions to give a little more context to who they are and why they're potentially here. And below her, I have Roman of the Empire, also a good friend, and then one of my dearest friends, Max, is on the bottom where he belongs. But I'm going to start off by just reminding everyone, for OnlyJosh, we try to keep these episodes to about an hour. So I'm probably not going to do a lot of interacting with the chat. If you feel like you have something you want to share, you can always super chat, and we will definitely go over that. But for the sake of time and making sure we can discuss what we want to discuss and cover everything that we need to cover, I'm going to kind of keep it focused on the topics at hand. But I want to go down the line here, and let's let people know who you are. And Sarah, I'm going to start with you. I've known you the longest. We grew up together, so share with the people watching what you do for a living and what you're, I guess, bringing to the table for this conversation.
All right, I'm Sarah. I am a licensed professional counselor associate, so I'm kind of like in residency. Long story in Texas. My husband he's been in the Army for 18 years, law enforcement for almost 10. And I guess that's kind of what I bring to the table, is the mental health part of this, and the fact that I like to focus on first responders and vets because they need, in my opinion, the most help. And yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Roman, let's tell a little bit. I'm sure most of the audience here knows these two guys on the bottom, but they may not know certain details about you. So Roman, let's go ahead and share who you are and what your history is.
All right, and thank you for hosting this event, Josh. Very much appreciated. It's an incredibly important topic. So I am Roman of the Empire. Before I became a snarky YouTube host, I served in the Navy for 30 years, 28 days, deployed to all the fun parts of the world. And now I'm at home. I'm at home, and I take care of my disabled daughter, and I'm here with my wife and my son and my dog Pippin, and living my life. Guys like me have a pretty short life expectancy after we retire. Our shelf life it's pretty diminished. It's like, oh, and then they find you dead in your driveway. So I'm still here.
You're still here, and we love you for it. And then last but not least, we have Mr. Maxfield Von Priestley. So Max, why don't you share some info about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, Roman, we are glad you're still here. So don't be going anywhere anytime soon. But yeah, no, Josh, seriously, thank you for putting this on, man. I think most people, whether they're online or just in general, don't realize that this month is also mental health awareness. I didn't actually even know about it until the Marine Corps posted something on LinkedIn, and they were like, hey, reach out to a battle brother, right? Do a buddy check this month because it means a lot. And I'm like, wait, that's this month, So thank you for reminding everyone and making this something that for a lot of people to access, because I think we may forget. So yeah, I was a Marine Corps officer. I was an artillery officer for 4 years within the Marine Corps. Similar to Roman, I visited all the really interesting parts of the world within the Middle East for our deployments. Thankfully, was able to come back with everyone intact. But coming home, there's a lot of talk coming back about what that means for our mental health and what that looks like as Marines, as warriors, getting back into the world, and masculinity and the health of masculinity and how it is seen in culture is something that is really important to me. So even in my new, my big boy job, if you want to call it that, I'm a licensed executive career coach. And so even what I'm doing currently now, I try to bring some of that into my coaching and whatnot. But when a world sees masculinity and men as inherently evil, patriarchal, nasty, vile, and, oppressive things, it's pretty hard to be seen as someone who wants to help. So this is a really interesting topic, and I appreciate you having us, man.
Of course. I knew I wanted to do this when we were in Dallas, Max, and we saw that huge billboard that mentioned men's mental health, and I was like, my May ended up being crazier than what I intended it to be. I was going to relaunch OnlyJosh in May and do a video on motherhood. We will keep that for future. But the moment we saw that sign and we were talking, because we were going to pick up Drew and Kyle, I knew this is something worth talking about, because we've had personal conversations, Max and I, about different things we've experienced in our life. And I know Roman, in some of the conversations I've had with him, has alluded to different things he's experienced. But, but between the three of you, I know you well enough to know your temperament, your thoughts, and kind of your overall, I guess, viewpoints on the subject, and that, more conversations need to happen. And I felt like each of you would be willing to come in and talk. So that's what we're going to do. And some of the stuff might be a little heavier for some people, depending on what you've experienced in your life. But we're going to try to, not pull any punches and share just the things that we've been through, share some statistics, and go from there. But now that the introductions are out of the way, we're kicking things off with a heavy hitter, and we're just going to jump right in with, let's talk about suicide, because I think it's something that we recognize is out there, but I don't think we necessarily recognize the prevalence of it, how much it's grown, the cases of suicide over the past couple of decades, and then especially in men, what we see. So I'm going to kick us off with just a couple of statistics that we have. So more than 50,000 Americans have committed suicide in 2023. Suicide is the 11th leading cause of death in the United States. And within that, men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide and account for nearly 80% of all suicides. Within that statistic itself, white males account for nearly 70% of all suicides in the United States. Wow. This one is tough. Sarah, will you read that one for me? The 10 to 14 just kills me.
Suicide is the second leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 10 to 14 and 25 to 34.
Yeah.
And it's bad. It
is bad. And then when comparing suicide rates of active duty military, the numbers quadrupled when viewing between the 20-year range of 1981 to 2000 and 2001 to 2020. Yeah. I personally have had friends that have either attempted suicide, and I've had acquaintances that have actually taken their life. I'm willing to share some of the stories I've had. I don't know if you guys have had any personal experiences with someone that's committed suicide, and if you're open to sharing at least some of the details or context or how it impacted you. Roman, I know you came to me beforehand and said you had some experiences, so I will let you take the lead if you don't mind.
No, not at all. When you leave the military, especially retiring, after doing the job for a very long time, 20 years or more, when you exit, I mean, and Max, I don't want to diminish, if you've served and done the job, but if it's been part of your life for most of your life, the changeover to being a regular person isn't an easy thing to do. Some people can manage it. You find things to do. But you've lost the mission. There is not the go, get the birds off the deck. The thing that has had you going for the last 20 or more years. So I've had two friends. Actually, it was last year I lost two friends to suicide. Both of them employed, doing well. And I was surprised. I mean, I know the statistics are what they are, but this was like out of the blue. It happened. One, he has a disabled son. And I was like, oh, dude. But the war was over. And another one of my friends, this one was much worse. He didn't just take his own life. He took his wife's life and then took his life. And that one, I mean, I was aghast. And again, both these men, there was 20 years of service for each of them. And they were in regular career fields and they were doing well. But it's not the same. It's not the same at all. I worked in the private sector for about a year and a half after I retired. It was a DOD related job, but it wasn't the same. You're in a leadership position, leading hundreds of people, and then you're in a cubicle looking at folders. It's a tough changeover. My in-laws were at the house after I got that job, and they commented on how absolutely miserable I looked. And I felt terrible. Leaving that job was probably the best thing I ever did. It probably actually prolonged my life by a number of years. So it's not the obvious target. Like I said, fully employed, doing well, professional men with families, and it happened. It still happened. And that's we say talk to your friends.
Yeah.
Gosh, you wouldn't even have known you needed to talk to these guys. That's the thing. It's not. There's not a big neon sign above your head saying, "Hey, I'm going to do something really dark." Yeah. The thoughts are there. They dwell, and I have many other friends that I've talked about with this, guys like me who've done, like I said, the number of years, and you kind of have your, as Max said, you have your battle buddy. I have a very close friend that when he's feeling dark, or if I am, we call each other. It's like, hey, I need some help.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was kind of what I was gonna talk to or ask you, Roman, was like, does the Navy have anything, or have you seen any good practices when it comes to, because as you alluded to, these are guys that are doing well, put a smile on their face, and I think that's kind of what men are told to do, is to just keep going, keep pushing, put a smile on your face, right? Because you don't want to show weakness, you don't want to show any type of vulnerability. So then once it happens, what's the conversation? Oh, he was doing great. I don't know what happened, right? And that's always what we hear. It's like, it's never this, he reached out for help, or he was going to therapy, or he was reaching out to his friends, or he wasn't doing well. It just kind of like happens, and we don't even, but we're not even really sure how to respond, because we're like, there were zero signs. Like, how do we help those men who may not be portraying any sort of symptoms like that, and I think that's the really tough question with this whole topic.
Yeah.
No, and we bring, and Max, as we bring a lot of baggage home, and we tuck that away and shove it in a sack and tie the sack and throw it in a ditch, because and you're right, we're not supposed to show the things.
Right.
We've been trained, and it's not. Do I have time to share a brief, story? Okay,
Go ahead.
This is what I'm talking about when I talk about we need to bury the weak emotions. And if I come a little bit undone during this, I apologize. I'm going to try not to.
You're good, brother.
So, again, before I was snarky YouTube host, I was Master Chief. Before I was Master Chief, back in 2007, I'm a 37-year-old chief on a detachment on a ship. I'm going to leave the big details out, but or the specifics out, I should say, but the primary bit of the story is here. We're on the boat. We're out for 3 weeks doing standard training mission stuff. It just, it's very routine. Except today it wasn't. It's 14:30, and the ship goes to River City. River City means all comms are being cut external to the ship. No phone calls, no email, nothing is going out from the ship. That means something has happened. So then my phone rings in my office, and it's one of our JOs up in the tower, and he lets me know that our helicopter that's out flying SAR crashed into the ocean. So we don't have details of this one. We just know the bird is down. But those of you who know anything about aviation know that helicopters don't glide. They fall. And when they fall, it's more often than not catastrophic. There isn't a lot of, every now and then you're lucky. But so run up to the deck. Everything's chaos on the flight deck at this point. We launch our other helicopter out to fly SAR for our now downed aircraft. They get one of the crewmen, it's the junior crewman who's on board the bird, and they get him back and get him down to medical. And I run down to medical. I fall down 3 ladder wells on the ship trying to get there. And I go in, and I get there as the kid is leaving. I mean, and it's like, I'm not supposed to be here. I don't know what to do with this. I go back. I let my boss know what just happened. And the bird is gone. Everyone perished in the crash, or nearly everyone, but no one survived. And then for the next couple of days, we're going around picking up bits of helicopter, a helmet, all these little bits. So now I'm the guy in charge of this. I have to maintain every emotion I have. I cannot crack. Everybody's looking to you. They're looking to you. You need to get them through this. So you don't have the luxury of having any kind of emotion that is going to send them on the wrong path. You have to hold it. You have to hold it tight. And then everybody it was probably midnight, 2:00 in the morning. And everyone was finally gone. Flight ops were suspended, obviously. And so I locked myself in the shop, and then I broke down because I was alone and I could.
Yeah.
But it's that face you have to maintain as the leader of men. You carry that. Like I said, when I said you shove it in a bag and bury the bag, that's what I'm talking about. And so you carry this around with you. And that's, and these are the kids. They're all wondering, geez, did I miss something? Did I miss something? Is this my fault? And ultimately, maintenance was not part of why this happened. They go through all the investigations and everything else. And that's, you want to say good, and that's a small consolation to the loss of a crew. I mean, one of the aircraft commander and I were very good friends. And it was very hard. And I can't cry in front of my guys because I lost my friend. I have to get them back on the ball. The mission doesn't stop. We're flying 2 days later because that's the way it goes. Yeah. That's the mission. Yeah. So things like that. And that's an event. That's my apex trauma event. But men have to deal with things of this nature all the time. And we have to carry the burden so that the others can move forward.
Yeah. We'll definitely get into some general statistics of what kind of leads to some of men's mental health struggles in a little bit. But I don't have any statistics specifically speaking to the difference that comes in from those that served in the military. So I'm just going to partner with Sarah. And Sarah, I don't expect you to just spit out statistics, but we're going to see that with generally men suffer with like work-related things, financial things. When it's the military, does it seem like maybe through your experience or what you've witnessed that sometimes it's less of that, or maybe that is part of it, but it also comes into, when we have soldiers, depending on what branch they're in and what we send them to do, we ask them to do things that they probably never thought they would do in their life or never have to experience in their life. And then even what Roman talked about, how they have to compartmentalize, something happens, but you can't take a moment. If you lose a loved one in the real world, you get bereavement, take a week off, try to cope, deal. There's all these things there for you. When you're in the military, it's pretty much like, okay, I'm sorry this happened. The mission still exists. Yeah.
You don't get the luxury of time to actually process shit, and having to compartmentalize is great because it fosters it allows you to get through it, but at the same time you bury it and you try to forget it never even existed, and then it just kind of creeps back like the boogeyman every once in a while. You're like, shit, that's still there. So if you don't process it even one day, and every time you talk about it helps, but that's the scariest part about suicide is how you miss it. I mean, just realistically, the ones who actually complete suicide are the ones you never would have guessed would.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all of them. There's several people who show signs, and they're like, Facebook is blown up, all their social media is blowing up with all these really sad posts, and you're reaching out. And a lot of those are at that point where you can still help them at that point. You're like, okay, hey, let's get you some help. Let's get you just some resources, the hospital, whatever we need. But it's the quiet ones, the ones that we miss, that give us even more guilt, because we're like, what could we have done? Like, we could have noticed something, right? Someone could have noticed. How did they get to that point without anybody noticing? And then there's guilt kind of hits everybody. And you were talking about kind of the idea of moral injury, where, guys go to war, they expect, okay, I might have to do this, but we're not in a war right now. We're not, maybe not, we don't have to, but then they're asked to do something that they're not just morally, like, oh shit, I have to actually do this. Okay. That can be even just as traumatizing as an actual traumatic event, and leave people feeling guilt and shame and that internal just, oh God, I can never tell anybody oh no, nope. That's why I think the last stat I saw was about 77% of men, I think, they admitted to feeling like anxious and depressed, but only, I think, not even 40% of them even talk to anybody about it.
Correct. Yeah, we have some of those statistics coming up in a bit. I will say I had two people. One, I found out in the moment they were considering suicide because of the situation. One, I didn't find out till years later. But one, I got a call from one of my good friends' wife, because he was drunk, so whatever was going on with him mentally just compiled, and you had that compound. And then also not being able to think clearly because of the substance abuse. But she called, and she was just in a panic because he hopped in his truck with his gun and just left. And it was like, can we find him? And thankfully he was on his own property in a field. And, I went to their place and managed to seek him out. And we just sat in the truck, and we didn't even really talk. It was just like, there was a very brief conversation of, hey, are you okay? I love you, brother. And then kind of silence. And I just sat with him because I didn't really know what else to do. But that was all he needed for that moment, to at least stop that moment. Another one was a friend in LA. We would always go hiking together. And there's about a year, because I changed careers, that we didn't do anything. And God, I'm getting emotional. I was going to go hiking one Saturday when I was off, and I hadn't spoken to him in a while. And I just reached out and was like, hey, I'm going to go hiking, in about an hour. Do you want to meet me at Runyon Canyon? And he did. We hiked. Everything seemed normal. Nothing seemed strange or weird. And it was like 4 years later, I found out he was ready to overdose, just end it when I called. So it's crazy, because those are the people that I thought, they're happy, they have their life together. It's not the people I would have expected to do this or consider it to the point that they were ready to take the action. So, Max, I don't know if you've had any personal experiences that you want to share, or.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, man, thank you for sharing kind of the experiences that you've had. And I gotta say, I don't know if you guys have watched the video with oh shoot, the UFC fighter, and I'm blanking on his name right now, but he's been big in the
Mm,
news a lot. He was on a show with a comedian, and both of these guys are really well known, really like I'd almost say celebrity status. And Theo Vaughn, who's the comedian whose podcast he was on, he was kind of probing a little bit of the questions towards Sean Strickland. That's the name. So he's probing some of these questions, and Sean just starts to break down a bit. And this is like a 6'3" UFC, big UFC fighter, starts breaking down. And what does Theo say? He goes, I'll sit with you here, brother. You don't need to see it. You don't need to say anything. We'll just sit here, man. And Sean keeps trying to talk, and he goes, well, and then he starts breaking down again. And Theo's like, don't say anything, man. We'll just sit here. It's okay.
yeah.
So Josh, I commend you for recognize that there are times when we as guys like need to speak, and we need to have that conversation. But then there are other times where it's just like, I literally don't have anything to say. I just need to sit here,
Yeah.
So the fact that you recognize that is pretty incredible. Yeah, unfortunately, I have had within the past, I'd say, past 3 to 4 years. I got out in 2021, and since then, I've had 3 guys, 2 from the same unit, and then 1 from the unit that I deployed with, commit suicide. One of them did it in the back of his Humvee on a training. They were doing a training thing, and he just didn't want to be there anymore. Another individual did it at home, and then another individual kind of did the same thing. Truck went off somewhere, but though I didn't know them as well as maybe Roman. You were saying that this was one of your best friends. They were still my young guys that like we went on a deployment together, and we got them home. And that's what's tough too, is like we're able to get them home from this intense experience on a deployment, and then to find out that it wasn't it could have been the deployment that added to the weight of everything.
Yeah.
But it wasn't actual combat. It was the experience of feeling the weight of being at home and whatever else he was going through. That's what ended up taking his life. So, I had 3 guys that unfortunately passed away, and each time they either ended up on the news or I would get a text from a friend of mine who would be currently still active duty and would say, "Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up, Sergeant so-and-so or Lance Corporal so-and-so," so thankfully we have the open communication to at least talk about that. But it's 3 guys in 3 years and these are just in my units. That's crazy. Like that's a number that should never even be thought of, a realistic thing. But sure enough, that's kind of what we're dealing with. So
Yeah,
it blows my mind.
I mean, it really is. When I was pulling the statistics for the active duty committing suicide, I think between 1981 to 2000, I think the number was like 7,000 and something, and then for 2001 to 2020, it was I'm wanting to say it was over 30,000. And look, it's these aren't people that have left. These were statistics for active duty. They were actively serving in the military. So it's crazy. And then once you think about, hey, this is everything they're enduring when they're overseas, and then kind of how we treat our soldiers when they come back. Because we really just kind of throw them back to be a civilian, and we don't set them up for success. We just kind of, force them to, just figure it out, get in the world. And, you've got some companies that are good and they will cater to try to help and assist and put people where they are. But I think a lot of times, especially if you've had a longer tenure in the military, when you come back and try to go into the civilian world, there's not really jobs at the level, that you're kind of operating within the military. You might have been a higher rank, and you come into the real world and suddenly you're, you're kind of going back to entry level positions and you're making a really low wage. So now on top of all the baggage that you've had that you endured when you served, you've now got all these other stresses that we experience every day, but it's new to them in that moment. And I just can't imagine how difficult that is. And I think in a lot of ways we let people down. Sarah, there was a video that went viral. Gosh, it's probably like a year or two ago of a veteran who, and I think we had sent it to each other and kind of talked about it when it came out. But there was a veteran that he struggled to find a counselor through the VA that he liked. And then as soon as he found one that he liked, stuff would change, and then he could no longer go see that counselor. And just the stress of it, like it broke my heart, because I'm just like, this dude's trying so hard to just overcome all the demons that he has, like everything that he's experienced and witnessed. And it was like red tape.
Yeah,
with something as basic as I need to sit down and talk to a therapist or a counselor. So
yeah, it's the ease of access for veterans is not great. Like, you have all the resources. They tell you, go to the VA, go to like your local veterans resource group or whatever. And yes, they have the peer-to-peer stuff, which is great. Like, don't get me wrong. The peer-to-peer stuff, being able to talk to someone who has been there, is invaluable. But at the same time, like you said, sometimes you get in a position, you're like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm not trained to do this. I don't know what to do. And yes, while listening and empathizing is important, but finding a therapist and one that you mesh well with is hard. And it's really hard to find one that you can actually talk to without feeling judged. Yeah. Especially a lot of therapists are a little bit less veteran supportive than they could be. It's really freaking annoying. And at the same time, I think not only do they do y'all a disservice as a veteran, but they don't really do much to prepare us as the families either for transitioning at all. Yeah. And I know that he was only National Guard, weekend warrior type thing, but he's still deployed for a lot of crap. He went overseas. He did, all this stuff from riots to wildfires. He was gone. But it wasn't until his third deployment that we actually had someone reach out to us. Oh, by the way, here's some signs and things you might want to look for in case they're struggling. I'm going, he's been in for almost 10 years. Not once did anybody tell us any of this shit.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Like, yeah, there were signs. There were tons of signs, y'all. So, I mean, they do us a disservice as the family, and without the family support as well, being educated on what they could look for and how to help them find a therapist, where to go, what they could, anything. I mean, you're set up for failure, and it sucks. And they shouldn't do that. They owe y'all way more than that.
Sarah, do you find that the men that may come to you, or men or women? Well, actually, I guess I'll focus our efforts on men for right now. But do you find that the men that either come to you or that you've heard stories about, when they go to therapy or they go to counseling or they go to whatever it may be, do you find that they are wanting to be heard or that they're wanting to be fixed? Like, do they want the problem fixed? Do they want tools and resources to understand how they can solve a problem? Or is it just because they're trying to get these stories out and figure out why am I feeling this way? Or and just trying to talk through some of the stories. And I guess there's a little bit of both there, but I know that men like to solve problems, but
exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely a healthy mix of both. You get the guys who come in and listen, my wife is telling me I'm yelling at my kids a lot, that I'm having night terrors, that I'm hypervigilant. I got to sit in the back corner. She's annoyed by it. And I'm going, okay. And I don't ever automatically assume that they're a veteran, because I think that's the worst thing a therapist can do, is automatically assume that a veteran has PTSD because of combat. Like, half of them didn't even actually see combat. They have PTSD for some other reason, or they have depression or anxiety or something in their childhood or something in their background or a bad relationship. There could be a plethora of issues. It doesn't necessarily mean PTSD. And for them to come in and say, I'm broken, is just heartbreaking in itself, because you're not. You're just dealing with something you don't know how to deal with. And you weren't prepared to figure out how. And it's a good, healthy mix of both, to really answer your question. You have the guys come in this is my problem. I need to fix it. Okay. So we talk about it. We fix it. I'm not one of those that circles the drain constantly. I'm a solution focused person. I'm like, all right, if this is your goal, let's work on it. Let's do it. Yeah. And then while we're kind of untangling this, we find this little box over here, and then we find this box over here, and I'm like, shit, you got a lot of boxes up here. You've got like caution tape that are growling over here in the corner. This one over here is just screaming. Like, okay, we're not gonna touch them yet, but I'm just letting you know I see them. You know that I know that they're there. So it's just a lot of them, yeah, it's solutions. They want to come in and fix a particular thing, and then when you get down to the meat and potatoes of it, it's something a little bit deeper. Like, not many of them come in saying, hey, you know, I think this is my problem, I want to talk about it. Not many of them do that.
Getting to the just needing to share, do you think a lot of that too is, you know, you have, I mean, clearly we have, and it's not everyone, I'm sure statistically it's probably a lower amount of people that are in the military versus the majority, but you know, there are soldiers that have had to do, you know, terrible things, and if you're quote unquote killing a bad guy, you might be able to come to terms with it. But if you're in a situation where, you know, you're overseas, you're in the Middle East, and there's a 11-year-old kid with a bomb or some type of weapon, and it's, you know, you have to take their life, or you're going to lose the life of multiple people, and you take that action and you live with that. You know, I think so many soldiers want to share, want to get that off their chest, but it's kind of like that idea of it's easier to talk to someone that you don't know. And I think maybe that's where a therapist or a counselor comes in, because if you go into detail and share this with the loved ones, I think a lot of soldiers probably have this fear of, are you going to look at me differently? Are you going to think poorly of me because you're going to see that maybe I took, you know, a child's life or someone's life or an innocent's life or whatever it might be. Do you feel like that separation of I can't share this with my loved ones, it leads to part of the problem that we see specifically with soldiers, and that once you factor in that access is hard for them, that's why we see numbers like we see with soldiers?
Are you asking me, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I mean, I
don't know if it was a me specific one there, yeah, but no, I mean, I think in my experience, yeah, it's shame. And it drives them to, you know, the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is I have done something wrong. Shame is I am wrong. And when they feel I am wrong, even if it was supposed to be something that was justified, kind of exposing that to their family is terrifying. Even exposing that to a fellow veteran, it can be terrifying, because then they might say, oh, well, man, you just had to do that because, you know, it was part of the job. When they're breaking because they took the life of someone they didn't want to, and it's difficult for them to even understand. And sometimes it's a rank thing, you know, officers and NCOs, like, oh God. So I mean, it could be even that barrier, but the barriers are there, and it's just trying to get them to understand that it's okay to not be okay with something that they felt was a moral and duty bound obligation to do, and that it's okay. And that, I think that's the biggest barrier, is getting them to just say, hey, it's okay to be struggling. Everybody is, whether they're good at hiding it or not. They just might be better at it, but it's okay to struggle.
Yeah. I'd never heard
alcohol and dark humor only solve so much.
Yeah, agreed. I'd never heard the separation between shame and guilt, and I think that's really interesting, and kind of sobering to hear. I don't know if Roman or Max had ever heard that, but that's
I had not, actually. That was an awesome bit of insight that I had never heard the guilt versus shame explained that way before.
Yeah. Real quick, and then Roman, if you need to pop out at any point, just feel free to go.
I sent Mrs. of the Empire a text. She hasn't gotten back to me. Either everything's fine or everything will be very not fine by the time I get back. We'll see how this goes. I'll give myself another about 10 minutes or so, and then I got it.
Okay. Yep, absolutely, brother. Real quick, I'm just gonna highlight some super chats for so Mrs. Sassy Sasquatch with $10 came in and said, you're doing great work here, Josh. Mental health awareness is so important and doesn't get the attention it needs. Hopefully, the more we all speak up, the more we can continue to spread the word. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Boosh wasn't a super chat, but he brought in some numbers that he thinks are accurate. But he said, I think the number is up to around 40,000 homeless vets, $220 billion to Ukraine to be laundered. I think the way we spend our money could be very different, and I think there are a few people that are in politics that are trying to work on that, but there aren't enough bringing those types of statistics to life. And then for a little levity, because we're talking about such a serious topic, we can always count on Subtle Deviancy for a little bit of a laugh. But Subtle came in with $5 and put, "I'm glad you're all here. Otherwise, my hamster, Hunter J, and homosexual jokes would have nowhere to properly land on live streams or in chat or X." But we love Subtle.
Subtle's great.
Yeah, Subtle's great. Like, Subtle always finds a way to say what needs to be said to provide a laugh. We kind of have
Josh, I'd like to comment on
go ahead.
one of the stats here, talking about suicide rates over the 20-year range from 81 to 2000, then 2001 to 2020. When you have to look at those numbers, I'm an older gentleman, so I can comment on these eras because I was there. The op tempo rate from 2001 to 2020 was an entirely different animal than from 81 to 2000. So you have guys deploying longer and far more often than they did. That's not a small impact on these numbers. You got a guy doing his 8th tour, or he's on cruise for the umpteenth time, maybe back to back. These things matter a lot when you're talking about, and the type of combat, and they're immersed in it. You know, the forever war in Afghanistan and Iraq. That wasn't the case from 81 to 2000. I mean, we were doing this and that stuff, but we had nothing like what we saw from 2001 to 2020 and slightly beyond. So anyway, I just wanted to say that's why that number is quadrupled, because guys are in the mix an awful lot more.
Yeah.
What's interesting though, Roman, is like that, like you said, that up tempo was pretty incredible, to the point to where these guys were coming home with just like nothing left, because they had given everything to the military, to the mission. They were broken, and then when they didn't have that mission anymore, and I guess that's where my question comes into play, is like I see a lot of these young kids that are currently in the military that aren't really deploying anywhere. I wonder if almost they feel like they never had a mission or don't have a mission, and so they feel kind of worthless. That they're like, "Hey, I joined to serve a purpose and to go do something and to go help people, or at least keep our freedoms safe. And I'm not doing that. So what am I doing?" At least this is what I've kind of seen from my experience, is a lot of guys that don't have the kind of busy schedule of a high tempo environment. They then get lost within their own thoughts, thinking, "I'm worthless, I'm nothing, I'm pathetic, I'm a loser," right? And that's where the thought creeps in of, I should just end it, right? So it's weird, right? Because it's like, I totally agree with what you were saying about the up tempo, these guys getting deployed for 8 times in 4 years or whatever. But then you've also got guys who've never deployed ever in their life, and they still do it at a rapid rate. So it's tough to really like narrow down and nail down like what the main purpose is for why we see it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess just an observation, but
yeah, no, but it's a valid observation, and it's something that I don't know if we'll ever like fully pinpoint it down. But I think as much of an awareness you can have and an idea to know to look out for these things, I think that is kind of a benefit and part of what we'll discuss. We pretty much have 2 other topics, so I'm going to try to go through them relatively quickly. If anyone needs to hop out at any point, that is perfectly fine, because I know I said an hour to y'all. But I want to talk about the loneliness epidemic, because I do think this plays a part in what we're seeing in the increased numbers. So just a couple of statistics here. So in 2023, the United States declared a loneliness an epidemic. And there are 1 in 2 Americans that suffer from loneliness, to the point that it results in physical health complications. So specifically because of how their body kind of reacts and changes, and the essentially the chemicals that you make within your body. Loneliness has led to an increase of 29% in heart disease, 32% in stroke, 50% in dementia, and 60% in premature death, which, and it's all kind of like subsects of one another. Like, loneliness led to something, which kind of led to this. But I thought those numbers were crazy, that we saw increases to that extent. and they kind of tie the root causes back to essentially being loneliness. COVID is often blamed for increased isolation, but time spent in person with others decreased by 58%, but from the year 2003 to the year 2019. So we started seeing this change even before COVID, and I think COVID just pushed it even further because we provided more ways to avoid people. Think of little things like going to the grocery store. I know most of the people that I know now don't go in the grocery store; they do the pickup. And there's no interaction. And wow. Sarah and I, we live in a small town, and it's always a running joke that you run into everyone when you go into Walmart. And it can be a pain in the butt sometimes, especially when you want to get in and out. But at the same time, it's like sometimes you see someone and get to say, "Oh my God, it's good to see you," and like hug and get a quick catch up, and maybe plan like a lunch or dinner date. Which Sarah and I think have said for like 2 years we need to like sit down and catch up, and it hasn't happened. We took a trip to Florida, and they were like, I'm never doing anything with you in person again. And then the final bullet point here is social media is often cited as a key factor leading to increases in isolation. So I kind of want to just touch on you guys' thoughts on this. Do any of these statistics stand out to you in a way, or do you have any thoughts on this idea of loneliness and the fact that we are now considering it an epidemic?
I can speak to it from the post-military standpoint, I think, because that's what I know. I regular people, I don't know what regular people do, but for folks like us, and Max, you could probably speak to this as well. We go in every day. We see the same large group of people every day. We're always in the mix doing something. And now, like I said, I'm done. I don't see people all the time. And the military, God love it. But once you are done, you're done. I mean, you're not in the rotation of, hey, this is going on, that's going on. You're just cut off. You still have friends who are here and there, but events that are going on just on the island, I have no idea what's happening anymore. Right? And it's fine. I'm quite content with my retired life, but not everybody has that. So when they are suddenly cut off from, this routine and feed of people that they have every single day, and now it's just them and their cat or their dog, or even it's just them and their wife at home all the time, or you're going to your job that you hate, but it's not the same. You don't have that camaraderie. You're lonely sitting in your cube, wishing, watching the second hand click ever so slowly on the clock so you can go home and sit and grab your bottle of whatever and drink until the next day and then do it all again. So it is a tough transition. I mean, and like I said, some people can do it and some people can't. And so loneliness post-military is a very real thing.
Yeah, the stat that my jaw almost dropped. 58% from 2003 to, or is that what that says? 2003 to 2019. Yeah, that's like, it's almost pretty much 60% of the time spent. And then it's honestly interesting that you put the next one too, because I was thinking about it and I was like, okay, so what do? We avoid all contact by any means necessary. We'll have someone drop off our groceries so that we don't have to make contact with people. But instead, or what are we filling that time with? And it's scrolling on social media, looking at people. So you're not interacting with people. You're actually interacting with them through the screen. And you're seeing these like warped, absolutely asinine versions of these like people that are just fake. And everything is completely not as it seems, and repurposed to be put on social media. And so it's sad that it's 60% less interaction with people, but an increase in then more time on social media, which is fabricated, fake, nonsensical. And what do we always say? Twitter is an absolute cesspool. And it's fake. It's not the real world. And yet that's what a lot of people will base their interactions with. So yeah, those last two really like had my jaw drop.
And it's interesting because we pretty much have like a couple of different generations here. So we've got Roman, that experienced a chunk of his adult life before social media came around, and that's not a dig. It's a reality.
No, it's a complete changeover
Right.
from when I was a young man to 2007 when everything changed. Because that's really when the bomb dropped, was 2007. That was everything after that was very, very different.
Yep. Because that's when the smartphones came out, and that's what I was going to talk about with Sarah. Is we started our adulthood with social media, but I feel like when we started kind of experiencing social media as teenagers, it was different then than it is now. Like the big things when we were younger were AOL Instant Messenger and MySpace, and the whole well, I mean, but the layout of it was different. Like the whole point was it wasn't about me, I. It was AOL Instant Messenger, go chat with your friends instead of doing phone calls, but also MySpace was, you had to, like, I had to go to Sarah's page to talk to Sarah to say like, hey, I'm going to go do this. Now everything's about, look what I'm doing. Look how great I am, so it's even a shift there. But the way we get notifications, the fact that it's on phones, the fact that it's immediate and it's just constant, and all the like serotonin things about like, how the chemical makeup of your brain, of how you react, how your body responds to, you got a notification or didn't get something. Like, it's mind blowing how different we are. And now we've got, people, Max, kind of in your generation and younger, that your teens and adult life, that's kind of your norm. That's what you've known.
Yeah.
There's so many theories out there that are insane about the timing of TikTok videos, why they're short, why they started with Vines, because it was just enough to hook you. It's almost like that serotonin and that uptake of just feel good hormones you get when you go gambling. And so you become addicted to social media. And like, that's a huge pandemic that's starting, is just the dependence on comparing your life to everybody around you that you will never meet. Is just stupid. It's so stupid.
Josh, I'm going to have to jump out. I apologize, guys. I wish I could
do not
around,
apologize.
but,
Roman, thank you so much for hopping in. Yeah, hey, you're good. Thank you for hopping in. Thank you for staying later than we thought you might be able to stay, and you contributed so much. And
and again,
thank you for having me, Sarah. It was very nice to see you, Max. It's about as nice to see you as it always is. So,
love you, dude.
Roman,
love you too, brother. All right, you guys take care. And again, Josh, thanks for doing this.
Tell the missus hi and thank you as well. So
I will. She's going to hit me with a pan, then I'm going to drink some more. All right, later.
Okay. Real quick, Sarah, I wanted to touch back on something that was on the previous screen, but the fact that the second leading cause of death for 10 to 14-year-olds is suicide. Do you think a lot of that is because of the world they live in with social media? Like when you and I were in school, if we were getting bullied, we left school and we had our safety. Like we had home, families. The friends we'd go play with, whatever it might be. And, we didn't have to worry about bullying if we endured it until the next day. But now it's like if a kid gets bullied, they're getting bullied in school, whatever happened or whatever embarrassing moment, maybe it's not bullied, maybe there's something embarrassing happened to them. It's now traveling and getting around because of phones and social media much faster than it used to. And then it doesn't stop. It's just the constant berating of, people have your number, people have your social, they're, resending the pictures. And it's that constant, like harassment almost of these kids just getting. Do you think that is a large part of that statistic being the second cause? Okay.
Absolutely. Because especially I think in our day, we could face who was bullying us.
Too.
I mean, we could, we could face them. But now it's even on social media, they have like the fake phone numbers, the fake accounts that they can create. It's never ending and it's constant bullying. I had several clients that are getting bullied from online, from Snapchat, Twitter, like all of the socials. And I think we had, I want to say 4 just in our area in East Texas that are in middle school that have committed suicide in probably the past 5 years.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's just never ending. There's no way to face your person to actually stop anything. And once the internet gets a hold of it, whatever it is that they did, whether it's an embarrassing tweet or it's just a weird picture or whatever, it's it's heartbreaking to see how fast it escalates from just one person making fun of you to now the entire school is laughing at you. And it may not even be something as outward as that. It could be just a pop-up, a notification, a snicker over here in the hallway that just starts building and building and building. And they don't feel like they have any recourse because the parents will never understand, so it's so sad. It's really, really sad. That age group it's bad.
The parents won't understand, and we've tied the hands of schools. We've tied them down so much that there's so much that they can't do, unfortunately. And it's almost like it gives these kids free reign to, act out like this. Max, we're talking about kids, but it hits with adults as well. Anyone that's familiar with our shows know that a few months ago, a relatively well-known comic book creator and YouTuber, Ed Piskor, killed himself for a similar situation. Like, there were allegations that came out. It's been, proven that they were not true, but he faced an onslaught of these allegations, and so much, it was thousands of people doing videos or, messaging him or whatever. And you had some ringleaders within his own industry kind of like rallying this up and getting the fire going. Let's light the torches and crucify this person. And it worked. Like, he had so much nonstop. There were people coming to his parents' house, and he took his own life because he felt like there was no end and there's no way to escape it. And no matter what, the public opinion had been made, and people were going to think what they were going to think of him, and that was it. And it's sad that we have this society that can do that and lead to that. And I'm hoping that there will be more action taken, and maybe there is. So if there's legal things out there where people are kind of being held responsible for this, push actions that push people to suicide, it's murky water. Like, how do you navigate that? They didn't actually physically kill the person, but they took a lot of actions to push them to doing it. It's wild. It's just a weird world we live in.
To speak on the younger generation real quick, and then to speak on Ed Piskor. I mean, you look at Josh, I think we had this conversation maybe in Dallas, but we were talking about what do young kids want now? How you'd ask a kid, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they go, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be whatever. Right. Now, what do they say? I want to be a TikTok star, dude.
Yeah.
Like, that's depressing as hell. It's like, we have no hope. Like, and so these kids are basing their entire existence off of their likes and off of that serotonin bump that you were talking about. And if they don't get that, they feel worthless. And so their friends in real life could be telling them how great they are. They could be doing great in school. But if they do not have the popularity and the status online, they feel like they have no meaning in life. And so that's really scary. The other thing I was going to say is an employee was talking at work and saying how their daughter is on TikTok all the time, and was like, the scary thing about TikTok is that it never ends because the algorithm continues to push videos to you. So you could scroll for days, weeks on end until your eyes are bleeding. It will continue to send you videos because that's just how TikTok works. And it's absolutely a drug. Same thing with pornography, but that's a different, thing for another day. But yeah, I mean, I totally think that is a major contributor, unfortunately, to the younger generation. And with Ed, I mean, what did we call him, Josh? The cancel pig mob. It was these are people with pitchforks and torches, and instead of out in the real world, they consumed him from online that manifested itself into real life. That's frightening that you can get a mob of people together so against this person because of a perceived, not even a guilty verdict, but a perceived fault, that you can get all these people together to go after this guy, so much so that they would have, like you said, people invading his house, people finding where he lives, people finding DMs from other women and other contacts and things like that, people disassociating themselves with him online, and it all started with a mob of people who were cheering and applauding the fact that they thought that what they were doing was just and right and virtuous. So it's scary, man. It's really, really terrifying.
The court of public opinion.
Yeah, there you go.
And,
Exactly.
it's like, it's interesting because I think we have a precedent legally that, if you pretty much verbalize a call to action, you should kill yourself, and someone kills themselves, you can be held responsible. But I don't think there's ever been any decision landed where, someone encouraged the harassment of someone, which then led to their suicide. And that's where I'm saying, like, it gets tricky, because part of me is like, there should be some type of consequences or accountability there for someone, kind of calling a mob together that lead people to that. But also, again, it's hard to kind of just determine. We've got Subtle Deviancy coming in with another $2. Again, adding some levity to this, but in my day, you could lose a fight and not go viral. It's true, I mean,
Exactly.
Sarah, did you ever have any slobber knockers in high school? I can't remember.
Probably a few that were never recorded, I'm sure. I'm sure I did.
So, yeah.
I'm sure I did. And yeah, I mean, you can't escape it now. That's the problem. Like, if you used to get bullied, like I said, you can move schools or hell, move towns, and lose with a little bit of dignity and come back in a new town like, oh no, I've never lost a fight. But now, everything is online. Your entire life travels with you in your phone. Yeah. And social medias follow you no matter what. So you can't escape it. So yeah, absolutely. You could lose a fight and still keep your dignity the next day.
We're going to go ahead and go on to, I think this is the last little topic, and then we'll try to wrap up for the night. But I wanted to talk about the societal stigma, because we were looking at all these different things that men kind of face or endure, and kind of touch on a few different things. But I want to touch on some statistics that lead to depression, and then or mental health issues, and then maybe why they don't talk about it. So the 3 leading mental health ailments impacting men are depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. The 3 leading causes in mental health issues in men are work pressure, financial issues, and health. Work pressure is cited as 32% of the reason, financial issues 31%, and health is 23%. 1 in 10 men experience depression or anxiety. Less than half receive treatment for it. 40% of, and that's within the men experiencing one of those things. 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about mental health. 29% cited that they are too embarrassed to speak about mental health, and the other 20% say there's a negative stigma concerning the issue. Max, I'm going to come to you first, because we've had conversations of, the willingness to discuss things when it feels appropriate, who you feel like you can open up to, and then how much to share. And I think sometimes it's easier for someone in my lifestyle to just kind of show their emotion, because it's kind of I don't want to say kind of expected, but they're like, but I think for if you're a soldier or a straight man or whatever it might be, there's more expectation that you don't share, that you don't show your emotions. And it's kind of like we open with that video. It's kind of instilled in you at an early age of boys don't cry, boys don't complain, just suck it up and figure it out. Like, well, I know it sucks, but you've got to endure. And, it's just that constantly it just gets drilled into you. And the reality is, as human beings, we need support. Even if you are a male, even if you are a quote unquote alpha male, at some point you have to share and let things out. But I kind of wanted to touch on or partner with you to kind of, I don't know, see what your thoughts are on this, because we've had the conversation of on one of your streams once of, is it okay to cry in front of your wife, or your girlfriend or whatever that might be. So I'd love to kind of hear your take on this, and then we'll kind of hear Sarah's take, because I think she'll bring a lot to the table here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to get Sarah's take on this because this is what I'm passionate about. Like this topic is like where I kind of I funnel most of my energy into this type of conversation. Um, I think because of the fact that there is the social stigma, and like you said, Josh, my mind immediately goes to if you're a guy, it is either embarrassing or weak to cry in public, no matter what no matter what the situation. It could be the birth of your child, it could be a loss of a loved one, it could be a death in the family, whatever it may be. And kind of what Roman was alluding to earlier, if you're the head of the family, or if you're the head of your friend group, or if you're the head of your job or your work, you kind of have to put on the leader's face until you can kind of get away and escape for a little bit and be able to break down in your own way. But then you have to pull yourself together and get back out there. And I think the question that a lot of men ask themselves is that how we want to continue living our lives? Or do we want to be more vulnerable? Should we be allowed to cry in social situations? But where my push back against that is, I've had women that I've dated before where they are a bit younger and like 24, 25. I'm 30. And they'll say, I want a man who's in tune with his emotions. I can't tell you how many times I hear that at work, when I was in school, with the girls that are here in California. It's constantly man in tune with his emotions, man who's with his emotions, man who can express his emotions. But then the second that a man truly does express his emotions, they don't know how to deal with it. The girl that I was dating physically moved herself away from me when I was expressing my experience on my deployment. She was so what's the word that I'm looking for? She was so like sickened by my expressing of my emotions because I was in tune with them, that it's like, okay, so what is it then? So does society actually want men to express their emotions? And I actually think no. I don't think society is ready for men to truly let out their emotions because, one, I don't think they've been trained and they don't know how to deal with them. And even if they did, men would not be seen as father figures or leaders or mentors or whatever it may be, because they would be seen as potentially weak. I don't know. So sorry to talk a lot, but yeah, no. So that's why this is really something to me, because it's like, man, just that simple question, like, should men cry? I don't know. Should they? I've seen stuff where it says no, they should not. So
that's bullshit. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like, damn.
It is. And, no, and Sarah, I'm thankful that it happened, because I really it teaches me so much about myself and about, her. Obviously, we're not dating anymore. So just things like that, where it's like, man, this is something that is a learnable opportunity. But yeah.
I'm still like mind blown. I mean,
right? Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, some people were not meant to be with veterans. I will fully support that, because some girls not. Some girls just aren't capable of hearing some of this shit and just being able to be like, oh, okay, you had to do that to survive, to get home or whatever. Okay, I mean, I can deal with that. And it's just some can, some can't. But I mean, still, it's oh god.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, because it's one of those areas where, like, I'm a firm believer that you should have people that you can talk with openly, and this is outside of even professional help. Like, by all means, I think a lot of people could benefit from seeing a therapist or a counselor. I think sometimes a stigma that if you're seeing a therapist or counselor, there's something wrong with you. And I don't think that's the case. And Sarah, maybe you can touch on that in a second. But I do think that you need to have a core group of people that you can just share openly with, no matter what's going on. Maybe it was just a rough week, work wise. Maybe there's some family stuff going on. But I definitely have certain people in my life that I have connected with in certain ways that I'm definitely open to sharing information with them. And I would say Max is probably, one of the handful of people that I do that with. Like, I feel completely comfortable talking to Max and sharing things, whatever they might be. but I also know him as a human being and where his heart is, and just as a friend, what type of friend he is. I think on the other end of that, what maybe I don't agree with is full on public open emotion. Like, I don't, I think once I referred to this as like, don't be a little bitch, and I say that because I don't know how else to say it, but like, if you're crying about everything in public, then maybe you have some other things you need to work on. And
Yeah.
I've always tried, and Sarah, you can tell me whether this is healthy or not, but especially if you're we often view men as being the leaders, right? And I feel like there needs to be like a 70-30 or 80-20 rule of, yes, you're the leader, yes, you're the strong one, yes, you're the one that's providing, but 20 to 30% of the time, you need to be the one that's vulnerable. And if that's with your loved one, it's with your loved one. If it's with a friend, it's with a friend. And I think, I think girls' nights for wives and I think guys' nights for guys are good. I think you need to get the husband away from the wife so he can share, just vent maybe. Yeah. They could do the same thing. It's fine. But I think you've got to have an outlet there. But I do think with your loved one, with your spouse, your partner, whatever you want to call them, I do think you have to have some sort of transparency there. And if you have someone that can't respond to you being emotional because of something that happened while you served, a family member passing away, or what, if they can't understand that you're getting emotional for that, then I don't think you should be with them. I think at some point you get into, psychopathic tendencies. Like, if I have a family member that died, and look, one of the stories I didn't share was my cousin was murdered. So my cousin was murdered by her husband. He ended up committing suicide after that. It happened when my mom and my aunt had come out to California. That was their first trip visiting with just the two of them. And it was the first day that they were there. So we were meeting up for dinner, and that's when my mom got the phone call. And we were out in public, which she had an immediate emotional breakdown. And I immediately was like, get them back to the hotel, get everything organized, arrange for the flights so they can go. And I was just, just like operational, and let me run through these things I need to run through. And I did not cry. I didn't have a reaction, nothing. And it wasn't until I was leaving and I was walking down the streets, but I was away from them, that I just like stopped and broke down. And I was with my, partner at the time. I just broke down, and I just had to stop and just like sit on the sidewalk. And there was a fence there because they were doing construction. And I remember I was just sitting there for about a minute or two. But it was that I felt like I couldn't be vulnerable in those moments, because that's where that leader aspect came in. I have to do this. And some of it was like, let me be there for my mom, but also for my dad. My dad is not here. My dad would be doing these things for my mom. Since he's not here, I need to step up. I need to be the quote unquote man in the situation. And then when I was out of that, I was like, okay, I'm comfortable with this person right here, that I need to let this out real quick, because I cannot walk right now. So I just let it out. But if something like that happened and my significant other judged me or harassed me or looked down on me because of that, oh, we're done. Like, kick the curb, See you later, you floozy. But
yeah, like if they're saying like, that gave me the ick, because that's a big thing now. It's like,
God,
yeah, no, you're done. But no, so what I hear, and you guys maybe can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing a lot is that, and this was portrayed actually really well in the film Saving Private Ryan with Tom Hanks, that he had just lost one of his young men, and he kind of walks away from his platoon, and that's when he breaks down and then has to come back together to go see, and then goes back to the platoon. And I think this is what we see with men, is they need just that moment to just like, I gotta get this stuff out of me. It's the who saves Superman. Superman saves everyone else. He's leading the charge and protecting those who he loves. But then at the end of the day, who's he coming back to, right? Who's the person who's going to let him just have that moment of vulnerability and that second of just like, okay, I'm good now, right? Because I think what we're seeing is you can't be 100% perfect all the time. emotionless robot, because then you won't have a good connection with anyone, with friends, with family members, with lovers. And so I feel like whether it is a guy or a girl, I think having someone there who you know that you can be a little bit more, there you go, Lady G, Lois, um, to be that kind of rock, because I think men need that. And I think from a Christian perspective, I think Christian men can be that for each other. But now we're seeing a really big push within the more modern Protestant churches to be much more, I guess, weak and weak in
Soft.
general and soft, yeah, where men are taught to be nice rather than courageous. They're taught to be kind as opposed to truthful, or whatever it may be. They're taught to be those who follow the leader instead of those who lead with a servant minded aspect. But that's a totally different conversation. With all that being said, I think what you're talking about, though, Josh, I think resonates with a lot of men. If there's tragedy or if there's a crisis, they are there to be there to hopefully lead the situation to a better place. But then once it's over, if you don't process it, that's when I think it turns to depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and that's when it turns into the negative things. If you don't deal with it, at least for a second, and then you can get back to real world. I don't know.
I think, go ahead, Sarah.
I've used the example with clients. It's kind of like a wound. When you need to dress a wound, you may throw glue in it, you may duct tape it, whatever you got to do to get it to stop bleeding, which is fine. You do that. But then if you don't go back and clean that, it's not going to look good in a while. It's going to start to fester. It's going to start to get worse. It's going to start affecting the people around you. So you have to figure out a way to let some of it out, even if it's for a minute. So that's why I said, sometimes that compartmentalizing, especially like first responders and military, you don't have a choice. Nursing, doctor, all these professions where they see horribly just mangled everything, traumatic experiences, having to compartmentalize that and go on to the next thing in the next 5 minutes. It's your brain's way of adapting to just horrific things. And it saves you in the meantime. But if you don't go back and have that moment where you can just ugly cry and give yourself that vulnerability with somebody, you're going to break. It may take a little bit, but you will break. And when you do, it's going to look a lot worse if you don't figure out a way to do that.
I was just going to say, Max, I think part of the reason I think you and I sometimes feel comfortable to talk or share is I feel like how we handle things is very similar. Like we kind of shut down in similar ways. Like and not to like air your stuff out, but we've had conversations about how we are similar in that way.
Yeah,
but I
absolutely.
think it helps us recognize that in each other to just kind of say like, hey man, just want to check in, make sure you're okay. Because I shut when I'm stressed or depressed or whatever, I tend to shut down. And then I go quiet, and then we recognize in each other like, haven't heard from this part, and we're in a group chat, so it's not like we're just like, hey there, Princess Priestley, what's up? Like when we see that the other isn't really responding in the group chat, or we haven't responded to a direct message for a while, I think that's when we kind of realize, I'm sure everything's fine, but, and that's what I've learned too, is I don't even, and this is why I got emotional with my friends, is I've tried to change when I was talking about my friends that were considering suicide. I've tried to change so much of my approach with my friends to, one, be present, but also just awareness, because I don't want to live with this thought of, what could I have done differently? What should I have done differently? And look, I know there's statistics out there that say there's really nothing you could have done most of the time. But I would at least like to know that I gave the best that I could to my friends, and it's a tiered level. I can't give all of myself to everyone, but I've got that close, intimate circle of people that I would give pretty much anything for. And then it kind of expands from there. But yeah, I don't know.
I distinctly remember, I think, so we had met back in 2021, I believe. And I think in
so.
2021 or 2022, I was at my old spot. So I'm, I've been here for, past 2 years or so, but I was at the old location with the, different layout of the office and everything. But I vividly remember getting to know you. Oh, I think it was through Twitter, because we had messaged through Twitter through Wes, who's another YouTuber here, on the Thinking Critical channel. And I remember just how funny it was, because we just started we just started having really deep theological and philosophical conversations, and we were getting into yeah, that's why I think that men's mental health and suicide and stigmas, and we started it was a month in, and we were just yep, we just I guess we just kind of understood where we were coming from, and we got a lot of we got a lot of what I would assume takes normally for a lot of other people years to develop that kind of bond. We did it within a few months, and then we're like, okay, this guy's cool. I can share. We almost hit everything, and then all the topics that we've talked about are not, or they're not taboo, or they are, they're not taboo. They're pretty spicy, and we just kind of laid it all out, and we're like, this is how we feel. And we're like, yeah, I feel similarly. So from that moment on, it felt much more of a brotherhood, because it was we know each other so well at that point that it's if I needed to, I could reach out to you, but thankfully it hasn't gotten bad yet. But I haven't gone through a breakup, so you don't know me after a breakup, and that's really scary. So
we'll be ready. So that leads us to the next topic. Sarah, Max has issues dating girls.
Oh no,
no, I'm kidding. No,
that is a whole nother stream for another.
That's a whole nother stream. That'll be its own episode. We'll have a therapy session.
4 hours.
We'll have to pay.
I would love to join. I think it'd be amazing. I do have a question for both of y'all, though. Since this is about men's mental health, what do you think y'all would need to see to go to a therapist, if y'all haven't already, or if y'all have? Because this is about men's stigmas, and what do you think you've had to kind of overcome to convince yourself to go, or have you, or is that still a struggle?
I'll go first if because I've actually never gone to a therapist. And I don't know if Max has or hasn't, but I'll say I've never gone to a therapist. And it's not even that I'm opposed to it. I think part of my reservation would be my ideals and lifestyle tend to be more conservative. And it's not in a oh, I'm a man, I don't need to talk to anybody. It's more of a I just have this assumption that most therapists are kind of liberal, extremely liberal, and it's just I don't know. And that could be ignorance on my part, and it probably is. But I think that's part of it. But I also think I've gotten so used to just sharing with close friends. And I get that that's not professional help, and there's probably some things that aren't healthy there. But a lot of what I need is just to, if I can get it off my chest, I'm good. Because I'm one of those types of people that I am so meticulous and I internalize so much. And part of that internalization is me trying to figure something out. So Sarah, when you're talking about, do people come to you thinking or saying oh, I need to be fixed, or, oh, I just need to get it off my chest? I'm one of those, I just need to get it off my chest.
Yeah.
If I felt like I needed something to be fixed, I would probably then go to someone thinking this needs to be fixed and I can't figure it out, but I don't reach that point. I haven't reached that point. I feel like I'm pretty strong in my resolution of, once I figure something out, I know what steps need to be taken and I take it. And again, there will probably be a day where I take those steps and it doesn't help. And at that point, I'm probably gonna say, holy shit, I need help. What the fuck? But I think part of it for me too, and this was probably something that would come out in a therapy session, as a gay man, as someone that hid who I was for so many years and felt like I couldn't share. I think sometimes there is that aspect of me that, if it's just an ordinary person, I probably, if you ask me a question, I will have a conversation with you, but I'm not going to openly volunteer information if it's not well known.
Yeah.
And I'll even say with Max, like one of the things that I told him when we first became friends is like, I've had a lot of straight friends that kept me at a distance because they were guys that were straight because of the perception, and it like they were fine with it, but you know, like their wife or girlfriend or whatever would be like, well, why are you hanging out with him, you know? And for them it wasn't like a dude, I can't be with you or hang out with you. It was more so like, I don't even want to have this fight. Like, he's a good person, he's a nice guy, like he adds value to our life, you know. And that's one of those weird things. So I'm rambling. I don't know if that answered the question for you, but I'm not opposed to it.
I think that's the biggest. I think that's the most manly thing on the planet is when a man knows his limits, because ultimately that's what most women want, is the guy who can also, you know, walk into the room and take care of business, but also be like the tender. You know, he can also cause, his hands can be sensitive and soft and loving, but he can also cause great destruction, right? Like,
I'm moisturized, so for sure. let me flex a little more.
We want
manly.
I think most guys that know their limits and can understand, like, okay, I can handle almost anything,
right?
But this one thing I might need a little help with. You know, I don't feel like that personally. Feel like that's a weakness, but I think men don't see it that way. And you know, I can't speak to that. You know, I can just see what I've seen, but I think that's something I've talked about, is this idea of the stigma of, you know, it's just not comfortable.
Yeah.
Sarah, you bring up a great point. Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
No, I was just gonna say, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, you know, earlier, Josh, you talked about being an alpha male, as you are, but don't you know, Josh, it's now Sigma male. So now Sigmas are the top.
Gotta be a Sigma.
Fucking Sigma
with that
male,
double riz. With that double riz.
With that double riz, Sigma male, alpha. You got the riz energy. Yeah. So
Andrew Tate ain't got shit on me, man.
And so that's exactly it. So I think it's so interesting how society will probably say, you know, you're Andrew Tate morons, like absolute 80 IQ, you know, just brain dead, brain rotted guys. These weak young men will go towards, I know, yeah, sorry. They will go towards an Andrew Tate because societal pressures will say, this is the example of a man. But then you look at what that man's actions are. He has no family. He has no children. He has no legacy. He's got what? Money, cars, and hoes. And he's an awful, awful person. So we're teaching these men that in order to find their purpose, they have to be Andrew Tate. It's the exact opposite of what, in order to be purposeful and in order to be a man who is going to have good mental health and a man who will surpass what society tells them to be, I feel like men need to have a purpose, and that purpose is going to be to protect and provide for either, you know, their job, their wife, their children, their home, their family, their community, whatever it may be. And that will give them true purpose, not money, cars, and hoes. But I was also, there was something to that I was going to mention. I think so I'll say I have been to therapy twice, once in college and then once after the Marine Corps. Well, after my deployment while I was still in the Marine Corps. And both times helped a ton. Mainly because I was looking for tools to learn how to deal with something. So, you know, like you said, Josh, writing things down helped a ton. And I didn't know how to do that necessarily. Also, the therapists that I saw in college and in the Marine Corps were both Christian, like spiritual leaders as well. So they gave me great book recommendations and great opportunities to like engage with other Christian men that were, you know, had the similar values that I did. So I have gone to therapy before because it was like, I'm broken and I need to learn how to see how these things can be fixed. But I think hopefully that answers a little bit of kind of what both of you guys were talking about earlier.
Yeah, answered my questions. It's really just how we can reach out to men and make them feel more comfortable. Because I mean, as a girl, you know, I can't fight the stigma. Well, I mean, not much, but you know, I've talked to veterans all the time, and I really reach more towards the families, quite honestly, because I can't sit across from a veteran and tell him, hey, I know what it's like to go to war and shoot somebody, or hit an ID with your Humvee or whatever. Like I can't do that. But I can sit across from the wife and say, I know what it's like to get a Red Cross phone call when your husband's been injured overseas.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I know what that's like. I can sit with you in that moment and I can help you adjust and help him support him when he gets home.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I kind of tackle it the roundabout way, really, through the family members, trying to support them and teach them what they need to look for. And I mean, it's just, it's an uphill battle.
Yeah. And, you know, I was thinking too, we're talking about all this stuff, but there's so much that we haven't talked about that plays a factor. We kind of hit some key topics in men's health, but, you know, like even things as basic as diet and exercise and, you know, different vices that you have. Like we did reference substance abuse, but, you know, Max mentioned hoes. And I think sometimes people's sexuality and this whole like sexual liberation thing, I think it is at a detriment to people sometimes, you know, like if your only goal is how many people can I sleep with, you know, what can that do psychologically? Because there's nothing there that's substance. It's just transactional. And I think, you know, that can play effects. There's just so much stuff that you could kind of cover in all this, but it, you know,
well, it's your
we don't have
self-worth.
all night.
You're basing your self-worth on how many hoes you can sleep with.
Yeah.
How many cars you can buy,
right.
You know, how many baby mamas you can have. You know, it's
right.
You're basing your self-worth on achievements that really don't benefit you. They don't help you grow as a person. There's no personal growth in that at all. So I mean, it's trying to figure out a way to change what you feel like your self-worth comes from and where your confidence comes from.
For sure.
I think it's interesting because, you know, Sarah, I think you were talking about earlier how, you know, women like to see men that may have a side of them that's like the strong hands that can build a house are also the same hands that can hold their child.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, and it's those moments of like, showing a little bit of emotion with their child or with, you know, an animal like a pet or something like that women just like melt over because they're like, oh wow, my husband actually has emotions. He's not just this like, you know, stoic brick of a person. Like he actually feels things and he loves me and he loves my child and this pet and whatever it may be. Where a lot of these guys, because like you said, Josh, everything is transactional. There's no interpersonal relationship there. There's no emotion there. It is soulless. It is strictly a product, or they see women as a thing to abuse so that it gets them to the next thing. And then same thing with pornography. And I don't know which one is worse. Is porn worse because you're not actually interacting with a human being and that's just transactional? You're just receiving something, or is using someone for a perceived benefit, is that worse? Because now both of you guys are in this position that it's like both of us have lost something here, right? So I don't know. I think both are kind of, you know, are making men more lonely. But I would say that I've seen more men struggle with the substance abuse of pornography and sleeping around than they have with drugs and alcohol more recently.
Oh.
I don't know.
See, I would say the opposite. I think I would say I've
really?
seen more people with actual substance abuse.
Oh, wow.
Because I think, and you know, Sarah, I think you kind of specialize some in sexual. I don't know how you'd phrase it, but
deviancy. No,
I mean, I guess maybe
I work with all kinds of people and all kinds of lifestyles, so
correct.
I get all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. But it's one of those things that where I think sometimes if you are a sex addict or maybe, you know, you're having sex for various reasons. And look, I know sometimes sex is transactional and I think it's just way layered and more complicated. But I think typically the sexual aspects of things, you know, maybe you're trying to fulfill something emotionally that you're just going about it the wrong way. Whereas I see people use substance abuse to escape everything. And even sex, you know, the sexual aspect of it can fall into that.
Yeah, that's true.
So, you know, I mean, there's so much that I've like personally watched people just kind of ruin their lives on when it comes to substance abuse. and it's sad sometimes. Sometimes it's people with so much potential and they're a great human being, and whatever it is, whatever they're not dealing with, whatever is impacting them, they let that. And maybe it's just that their substance abuse started because they did something recreationally, and then the substance itself created the addiction. But I've seen too many people ruin their lives because of substances, and I think it's sad. Because I felt some of these people had so much to offer the world and then didn't. They came short of that. And not saying they died or committed suicide, they just put themselves in a position where they couldn't do what they should have been doing. So,
yeah, one of them being someone extremely close to you for over a decade.
Yeah. So, yep.
And I think
Indeed.
it's unfortunate that both substances and porn are coping skills. That's all they are. It's just maladaptive coping skills.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to figure out what's underneath that, causing you to feel like I can't date anybody else, or I can't have a relationship, or I'm not worthy of a relationship, so I'll just watch porn, or pay for OnlyFans or whatever, versus I don't, I want to check out for some reason because my home life is horrible, or I can't handle what happened overseas, or whatever the reasons could be happening. And the substances, especially prescription pills, are so easy for veterans to get a hold of. That's all they.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.
Oh,
that's a whole other thing. Because
that might have to be. That has to be a future episode.
It's just super easy. Just here's the script for this. Here's the script for that. And then the VA system itself, it took an act of Congress, a literal voted act of Congress, to get therapists in the VA. It was social workers and psychiatrists and psychologists.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no hate to social workers on any platform, but if you're a clinical social worker, you have more clinical skills, so you're able to handle certain things. Psychologists are normally researchers. Some of them have clinical experience, some of them don't. Psychiatrists are medical doctors, literally there to prescribe you medications, may or may not have clinical training. So, why not hire the therapist? Maybe that, that statistic that was, I think, last year or supposed to change, like 22 vets a day committed suicide at some point. It's like, maybe it's because we're sending them to the VA that's ill-equipped to handle their issues.
Yeah.
Maybe food for thought there.
Just something, just off the top of my head. Yeah. No, that's
a whole other podcast though.
Yeah. Whole other podcast.
Whole other episode.
I have kept you both way longer than I said I would, so we will start wrapping up. Before we kind of get into any closing statements, is there any other questions y'all might have for us, or no?
No.
Cool. I will say, I think the big key thing here is what I would hope would come out of this, and people having these conversations, and Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, is that people will have more conversations. I think the biggest thing we can do. I think it was I can't remember what they are, the American Prevention for Suicide or whatever it is. I think their statistic is that 99 is that Sarah's smiling because I butchered it, but
no, you're fine.
But they've got a statistic that 99% of people believe that suicide specifically can be prevented. And I think it comes to having conversations and the willingness and openness to have conversations, and the destruction of the stigma for men to feel like they can have conversations. So I think if the more people you have kind of speaking out on, maybe they've been to therapy or they have a friend or whatever it might be, I think it's going to encourage others to do that in whatever means they feel comfortable doing it. And I think that's the first step of just like, hey, just, create an openness to talk. And if that can happen, I think that's the biggest hurdle that we face of, try to just eliminate that stigma. And again, the best way to do it is just to talk about it, to be open. And it's particularly why, I asked both you, Max, and Roman to come on. I think if we were to describe a manly man or what's considered masculine or whatever, if you were to say, a artillery captain with the Marine Corps for 5 years, yada, 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 I think people are like, that's a masculine dude. And I think if you were to say, someone that served in the Navy for 30 years and, was a Master Chief, I think people would go, that's a masculine guy. It's two different generations, two different, lifestyles. But the fact that both of you could come on and share experiences that you've witnessed or been through, and kind of share, the importance of having conversations and the conversations you've had or we've had or whatever it might be, but also just to talk willingly on a live public stream that whoever in this world can find on YouTube at any point, or Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call it. I think more of this is a positive thing. So, and then we'll just claim we'll be after. But anyways, love you.
And no, I thank you for saying that, man. And I'm kind of coming to the realization more and more that, by description on paper, Roman and I, you go like, oh, those are stoic, masculine, like super masculine men. They probably came on here and were just like, you got to wake up at 4:30 every morning, and you got to make your bed, and you got to go PT and do all this. And it's like, sometimes you kind of have to talk about the stuff that matters even more than that. And sometimes it's these things that can be more heavy of topics. And so, though I still don't necessarily agree with the whole, like, be in tune with men have to be more in touch with their emotions or whatever. I do think men have to be self-aware. And oh no,
sorry,
you
had I don't know, you did the hand motion that made the balloons come up.
Oh, did it? Oh, did it do the thing? Oh.
Yeah, just when
I didn't even see it.
Perfect
Oh,
timing.
there's the confetti. Oh well. But yeah, men who what was I saying? Men who may be more self-aware and not necessarily like emotional. I think there is a subtle difference there. I think you can still be a leader and a masculine individual, and I think it's almost makes you more masculine if you do understand what makes you tick and how you function as a guy. Because if you're not self-aware, you're just, I don't know, I feel like you won't have that same connection with other people. So but yeah.
We have 3 more comments real quick, and then we'll actually do just our closing statements. But we have Cajun Corey here for $10. He put, I wish we could have talked more in private in Dallas, Josh, but I want you to know how much it helped. I've noticed how much better off I am now than I was before that trip. Thank you, brother. Love you. Yeah, man. I think Sarah would feel the same way about me. I think Max feels the same way about me, but I'm a firm believer that if I see something that I don't think is right, I'm going to stand up and say something, even if it causes me a shitstorm of problems. And that's how I felt. And I'm more than happy. Look, even if we're not the closest of friends, and I'm in no way am I saying that we're not close friends or anything, Corey, just in general for anyone that's watching this. If you're ever in just a terrible, 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 terrible situation and you feel like you've got no one to turn to, please reach out. Like, that's my thing. But I'm always going to try to do what I think is right for someone. But yeah, man, it was my pleasure to talk to you. And I do wish we would have had more time. There's a lot going on. It was a very fast weekend. But we have each other's number now, and we can text and call whenever we need to. So, and then, Max, this is for you, but from the dating scene, you can always go back to Tina. And I know that Sarah has no clue who Tina is, but I will fill her in after the show so she can have a good laugh.
Please do. I mean, Cajun, I am subscribed to Tina's membership status. So, yeah.
Oh, this sounds like this is going to be interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I'll fill that stage to keep from ruining the show. But yeah. And then Roman is letting us know he's got a flat spot on his head from the frying pan, but it's okay. And then he said, you're doing God's work here. And thank you, brother. I appreciate you for popping in and being on the stream. I'm just going to, I guess, go with this. What are your final words, and what do you hope to see, I guess, in the future as we move forward? And Max, if you don't mind, I'll start with you.
I think what I really hope is that a sense of traditional masculinity comes back into the fold, and these young men begin to see what it means to truly be a man. And kind of like we talked earlier, I think that means having a purpose and providing and protecting people in whatever shape or form that looks like, and whatever capacity that is. And I think if men have purpose, they will begin to we will begin to see a better statistic when it comes to men's mental health. I think it has to start with their purpose, because if they have a purpose, if men have a mission, they can do anything. They will lay their lives down on the line if they have some sort of purpose, and they will die for a cause that's bigger than themselves. But if they do not have that, which I don't think men have, because they've been told that they are toxic, they've been told that they are unworthy and problematic and inherently bad. Why would a man ever strive to find his purpose when he knows that he can't? He will always fail. So that's why I think that's a core issue: is men need to find their purpose, and our society needs to help them get there. And sometimes it's going to take the men in our society to do that for ourselves. We may have to pull up our bootstraps and just be like, enough. We have seen too many young men die at their own hands. And so we need to start bringing back these traditional values of purpose, protection, and provision. So
I'm just really appreciative, one, that I was asked to come on here. So thank you both. Thank you, Josh. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing, Max, to try and help guys find their purpose, especially with the coaching thing that you're doing, trying to get them to find that, because I agree with you. I think this idea of, toxic masculinity is I literally looked that up the other day, and the first, like, how to treat it, even though it's not, that's a whole thing. That's a whole fucking thing. Was be less masculine. And I'm like, what? All right, wait, what? That was literally step one to fixing toxic masculinity. Be less masculine. Like,
you're like, wait a second. How does that work?
I don't understand, but thanks, Google, and thanks for influencing probably half the population with that. So, I mean, it's a constant battle. And so, I mean, I appreciate y'all trying to bring a platform to this and a voice to this, and hopefully to encourage other guys to seek help. And I know as a girl, I can just encourage. I can't really make too much change, but I appreciate y'all being willing to talk about your stories and your own mental health and your own issues that people need to see, because I think if they would see that guys are still capable of seeking help and still being, that alpha guy that they want to be, that it doesn't diminish their worth. It doesn't diminish their confidence. In fact, it helps. And if they would just do it. Even just once, just try it, just give it a chance. And I really appreciate being on and talking about it. And I really hope that at least someone sees this one day and gets convinced enough. They're like, okay, maybe I'll try it, and does it. And I really hope that they do.
Yeah. I think the thing that I would want a lot of people to remember is or think of or be aware of is, if you ever do reach the point that you're considering suicide, and part of the reason you're not talking to someone is because of shame or guilt or whatever it might be, embarrassment, just know that whoever you're afraid of having feel that way, or maybe having looked down on you, they'd much rather probably know whatever you're not telling them than live in a world without you. And then the other side of that is we talk about how damaging social media is, and how we live in this world where everything's just so sudden, instant. But that can also actually be a great tool for us. We have ways of communicating with people with such ease now, that make it a tool for good. If you think of a friend during the day, take 30 seconds to a minute to be like, hey, just send, hey, was thinking about you, hope everything's going well, or how are you doing? Because even if it's just a brief exchange, that might be something they need. And part of the reason I told the story about my friend when we went hiking, there was nothing out of the ordinary of that. The only thing out of the ordinary is that we did it consistently for a while, and then we stopped because our schedules changed. It was harder to align, and then I had a weekend where everything kind of fell into place, and something that was just a normal thing for us potentially saved his life. It's just, you don't know what the smallest act can do. So, take advantage of the ability to communicate, to share, to do different things, and don't be afraid to just reach out and say, thinking about you. There's nothing wrong with that. Or, in the case of Sarah and I feel like half of our conversations start because we send like a stupid video to the other, and then it's like, let's catch up.
We never do, but
we'll catch up in text, but we really do need to go get dinner or something. Because I'm like probably a 15-minute walk from your house. That's what's really, really sad. Shut up, Max. But yeah, I mean, look, it's people have busy lives, and I think if there's something I'm guilty of as a friend, there are times that I convince myself, oh no, they're too busy, I'm not going to bother them. And that's something I'm trying to work on as a friend, because and I'll say in Sarah's case, like, she's married, she's got 3 kids, she's got her career, and I'm sure, trying to plan and negotiate is hard, but there's times where I could just say, like, hey, what are you doing? Let's all go grab dinner, or whatever, let's grab an ice cream or something, like, let's go to Dairy Queen, who cares, just something. I can probably do a better job of leading with that initiative, instead of just convincing myself, oh no, she's going to be too busy anyways. So
I'm a horrible friend. I'm okay with it. Like, I'm just
we're both the worst.
I'm just suck ass at it. It's horrible. I'm just like, okay, well, I love you all. Like, I'm thinking about you all the time. I just don't have time some days. I don't have the brain power, especially with seeing clients. Sometimes it's just hard to talk to people at the end of the day.
Yes, that too.
Sit there and read something or listen to some music, and hopefully not this damn cricket that's in my office is driving me crazy.
They were excited. Shit. That cricket was excited about the conversation, so they joined in.
That's really annoying.
No, you're good. It's a nice ambience in the background.
Right. No, not on purpose, y'all. I'm so sorry.
You're good. No worries. No, I just, before we do end it, I want to say thank you to both of you. Thank you to Roman for coming on and being open to share and talk and have a conversation. And Sarah, you said you were happy to be invited, and I've kind of wanted to get you on for different stuff, and this made the most sense. I think before I'd even talked to you about wanting to do some streams talking about Buffy and psychology, because I like understanding people and how they think. And that's one of my favorite shows of all time. I'm dragging Max through it right now. He suffered through season 1. But there were courses you could take in college to get psychology credits from watching the show. And I think it's just fun to kind of unpack those things. But maybe that'll happen in the future. We'll see. But this just, to me, seemed like the perfect thing. And I was like, dude, I hope she's comfortable to get on and like talk and share. And I'm happy that you were. And it's kind of nice to kind of mix two different aspects of my world together, kind of like my YouTube family and friends that I have here, and just kind of bring them all out. But I thought this conversation was important. I felt like it needed to happen, and I couldn't have thought of better people to join me and kind of lead this. So thank you to the chat. Thank you guys for pretty much exactly doubling the time that I said we were going to take. Sarah, I'll let you get back to your husband and your kids. And Max, I'll let you get back to your cat, Gideon. And I'm going to go, spend some time with my son, Ollie, my dog. But everyone have a good night. And again, just reach out to friends and check in. It's never a bad thing to do. So. Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.